Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learn Plus. I'm Brenda Bailey Hughes. I'm a LinkedIn author and a teaching professor at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. I'm so glad you have joined me today to learn more about how to unlock your influence through story. I want to start with the story, knowing that it's a great way to influence and maybe model that for you a little bit. Years ago, I was a brand new organizational development consultant on a team of 4. And we had these open enrollment style training workshops that anybody in our organization could sign up to come to. But to get one of those open enrollment courses in our catalog, we had to go through this pitch week with our boss where we pitched new ideas for courses. Well, I had this idea that I thought would be really awesome. I probably shouldn't have been pitching to teach the class. I probably should have been pitching to take the course because it was something that I needed and was really meaningful to me. I went into my boss's office on the day it was on the pitch day, laid out these facts about some needs assessment that I had done and why I needed it, and wouldn't this be a great class? And I was really excited about it. And she listened without interruption, and then she just said, no, I don't think so. And I was so stunned by this rejection that I didn't even really know what to do with myself. I didn't push back much at all. I just kind of slunk out. And then as the pitches went on through that week, I was watching other people make their pitches, and she's saying yes, and she's saying yes, and she's saying yes. And I realized they had engaged in a lot of the things that I had studied about persuasion, that I taught about persuasion, but that I had failed to apply. So persuasion or influence is so critical to our careers. And it's one of these learnable skills that we not only have to learn, we have to apply if we're going to affect our organizations in the ways that we want to. So today, that's what this is all about. We're going to learn how to unleash all this influence and all the techniques that you have inside of you. If you're live with us, go ahead and maybe chat your name and where you're from, just so we have a sense of who's joining us live today. We're so glad that you're here. I have a colleague that's going to help me unpack some of this information about influence as we discuss it today. This is Dr. Daisy Lovelace. Daisy is an associate professor of practice and the executive director of the Management Communications Center at Fuqua, the School of Business at Duke. Daisy is a longtime friend. She is a leading voice and author in the LinkedIn library. You're going to learn so much from Dr. Lovelace. So let's bring Daisy on in. And as she's coming in, I see we've got Lori here from Massachusetts. We've got Julie. Julie from Benesh is here. Seattle. Thanks, Alan, for being here. Oh, we've got some Bloomington folks too. Love it. Aaron, always great to have you. He's a Kelley colleague as well. Nicolette is here from Durham. That's great. I'm thinking that's a contact for you. There we go. So glad to have all of you here. Others, feel free to continue typing in your name and where you're from as we roll. Later in the session, I always try the Learn Plus. The plus is that for people leading teams or facilitating trainings themselves, we always try to give you one tip. So I have some students from the Kelley School of Business who've so graciously volunteered to join us today. They're going to play a game with me and Daisy that will help illustrate the concepts that she and I talk about today, and give you a tip, a game that you might be able to play when you're trying to teach your teams how to influence. Daisy, hi, how are you?
Hi, Brenda. I'm well. Thank you for having me. It looks like we have friends joining us.
It's fun, isn't it? So glad that you're here. Well, let's start with maybe just talking about, I know you and I both teach influence from this perspective of sort of Aristotelian rhetoric, where there are these 3 pillars of ethos and pathos and logos. And maybe we could talk a little bit about what each one of those means to you and why you use those when you're teaching influence to others.
Absolutely. And first, I want to just go back to that story you shared, right? Because we've all had that feeling of excitement about an idea or an initiative and then being crushed because for whatever reason, it just didn't land. And it didn't land, and it's not necessarily anything about the idea itself. It's likely about how it was framed. And this is the challenge for all of us, right? You might have these great ideas, and if they don't go anywhere beyond your mind, what use can they be? And that's
Yeah.
the reason why the conversations around how do we influence, how do we use storytelling or use rhetorical tools to help us get our ideas across is so powerful. So I'm excited to engage in this conversation. So to answer your question, I think about these three areas, these three pillars as interconnected, but then also I try to think about them as thinking about myself, thinking about the person I want to influence, and then also what is the initiative or the idea? And so I put it into different categories like that as I think through what I'm trying to do here. So one of the things that I say upfront when it comes to these is that this is an age-old way to think about persuasion.
Mhm.
Um, Ethos is really about you. So, right when I was saying that those three categories, ethos is your credibility. Do you come across as someone who is credible in terms of your delivery? Are you confident in what you're sharing? Are you trustworthy? Can the audience or can the person you're speaking to trust the information that you're sharing? Are you using sources that are credible? Maybe you've done some research or some analysis. Have you done this in a way where people can trust the ideas that you're sharing? So that's ethos.
Okay.
Pathos is really about connecting with the audience. Can you bring in emotion? Can you appeal to their values or their emotions to get them excited about the topic, get them intrigued or interested, whatever it is you want them to feel in order to get them on board with your idea, right? So maybe that's thinking about quotes or vivid language. We'll go into a lot of specifics, but for that one in particular, that's where I think about what do I want my audience to feel about
Mm.
what it is I'm recommending. And then
Yeah.
finally, last but not least, logos, the idea itself. Is it logical? Is there a logical appeal or logical structure to this? Is it easy for the audience to follow? Is it clear where you're headed with this? Or is it difficult for them to see what you have in mind? So, in a nutshell, that's my take on ethos, pathos, and logos.
Love it. Okay. And I love that. I've never framed it as the self other concept before. And I think that works really well, and appreciated that that idea that when it is the other, it's not about what they think. You kept saying it's what they feel. So when we get to that pathos part, it's no longer about the head. It's about sort of the heart or the belly and what that is all about, and tapping into that. Love it. Thank you. So does everyone kind of have a good sense then of these three different pillars of influence? This ethos, credibility appeal, pathos, emotional appeal, logos, logical appeal, and that they work in tandem. It's not, they're all connected. And that I think, would it be appropriate, Daisy, to say that when we weave all three of these into a communication effort, we stand a better chance of influencing others? Is that kind of how these work?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have the ones that we probably rely on the most, or we think about the most, and we really, when we want to be the most impactful, we need to think about how we can bring all three together.
Okay, so let's see where our audience thinks, what they think about most. We've got a poll for you that Shelby, our producer back screen, is going to pull up for us. There we go. You can either scan the QR code if you've got your mobile device handy. If you're on your mobile and that's difficult, there's a Slido number that you can type in at slido.com. We're just curious, which of these pillars do you think you use most often? So Daisy just said it. You know, yes, we need to use all three, but there's probably one that we think about a little more than others. And so we're curious to see which ones of these you think about most. And we don't want to sway the audience, so you just answer honestly. But Daisy, do you, in the clients that you work with and the students that you work with, do you find that people lean towards one or the other of these?
I do. I find that, especially because I spend a lot of time working with people who have high levels of technical expertise, I find that logos is where they like to focus much of their attention, that they spend a lot of time thinking about the technical aspects of something, and that's where they focus their attention.
Yeah. here's what the facts are, here's what the financial analysis is, here's what the technical data shows me. If we're talking, if we go back and look at our last few PowerPoints or our emails, if we did a quick email audit, if what we see is fact, then you would say, you probably ought to click the logical appeal button on this poll, right? How
Yes.
would we know if we were leaning into ethos? What would we be seeing in our communication if we were an ethos follower?
Well, there would be some emphasis on what you're bringing in terms of the idea, and also some work to build the relationship so that there's trust. We a lot of times think about influence as, I've got to give this presentation to my boss, like the example that you gave, and we think of it as a one-time opportunity or one-time moment, when instead we should think about it as a campaign of influence. Every opportunity you have to interact with decision makers is an opportunity for you to add to your credibility bank. It's an opportunity for you to build on how you are perceived, your personal brand. It's an opportunity for you to think about building trust with that person, so that when you are bringing forward an idea that might seem out there, that might be a little out of the box or outside of how things are typically done, that you've already built up some credibility with that person.
Yeah. I love that idea that influence is a campaign and not a one-shot deal. I know in hindsight, that's one of the things I definitely messed up with that first boss. Come to find out, that meeting, that pitch meeting, that was just a formality for all of the other training consultants walking in there. They had already talked to our boss about their idea. They'd heard her objections. They had massaged their idea to address those objections. I never even mentioned it. I was kind of holding it really close to the vest, like, woohoo, I'm going to give you this surprise, wonderful idea. And then, well, we see the results. A good flat rejection. So if I had been campaigning along the way instead of holding it as a surprise, I think I would have had a lot better luck. Learned the lesson.
I like to think of rejection as redirection. So it gave you feedback that you needed to help you fine tune and tweak, and then you learn from the experience and didn't do it that way in the future.
Absolutely. In fact, the end of that story is that I pitched it again in the next round of pitches, but had campaigned. I had integrated more emotional appeal. I had done a better job of analyzing my audience. I was in there talking about all the reasons I needed this. And she was at a very different stage in life, and she was thinking about the things that affected her, and it just didn't land. And I think she was looking more at our intended audience than I was too. And I had to train myself to say, this is why our employees here at the organization need this as much as I do. And so really better audience analysis, which is probably part of that credibility build, as you said, to make things, to make myself seem more trustworthy. All right, so it looks like our listeners on this call think that credibility appeal is the one they use the least. And then we got a flat out tie there between logical appeal and emotional appeal. Thank you for the poll. We'll keep it live if you want to keep filling it out. It's something that Shelby might post in a follow-up just for our group to see where we all landed. But let's real quickly give some examples, since ethos was our lowest rated. Let's help our learners with what are some tactics that you would take if you knew you weren't being intentional about credibility as much. And you mentioned a few, like citing sources. I heard you say. You mentioned just now that trustworthiness comes from building relationship. Are there other tactical things that you might want to share? How do you help people build that credibility?
Yeah. So one thing to keep in mind here is, regardless of where you are in your career journey, you can be influential. Regardless of where you sit in the organization, you have opportunities to lead up and demonstrate your credibility and influence major decisions that are being made. So one of the ways you can do this is to just talk about the work that you've done, right? If you're making a recommendation, you've likely done some research. You've likely done some analysis. Maybe you've looked at what other industry experts are considering or what else is happening in the field. Don't be afraid to share that information. It's oftentimes, like you were saying, you kind of hold it all to yourself, and you do that background work to make sure you're ready, but then you don't share it. That's important to show that off, right? I've spent some time studying what's happening in our area or looking at what's happening in the industry, and based on that, I've drawn these conclusions. And demonstrate that you have the credibility to be having the conversation, right? We often think we need to do the homework because we've got to get ourselves prepared. And then we don't talk about, now I want to be careful here because I don't want to go into every detail of your analysis, but it is important to say you've done the analysis. Explain
Yeah.
what you've considered, talk about what you looked at, make that all very clear.
Yes, that makes so much sense. Yeah, and thanks for that clarification because I have sat through too many presentations where someone felt like it seemed as though someone thought, the more I tell you about everything I've ever done or thought in this hemisphere of this topic, the more credibility I have. And then I just feel overwhelmed and end up tuning them out altogether. So absolutely, I like that idea that a little bit of the background, a little bit, help me understand that you've put the work in, that you've put some effort in, that you have some, maybe you've done this even with another department or another organization. All those are great credibility builders. Yeah, good. What about logos? How do you advise people build that logical appeal?
So the logical one is often the one that people struggle with the least, to be honest, right? They're thinking about the logic of their recommendation, the reasons why, but oftentimes where they struggle, they have tons of logos or logic, but where they struggle is how do they share it in a way that's friendly for the audience, right? So
Mm.
thinking about the structure of what you're communicating. And so I like to give people simple ways that they can structure the logic of what they're talking about. If you're making a recommendation, just focus on answering 3 questions. What do you recommend? Why do you think this is a good idea? And how are we going to get it done? Right? Answer why, what, why, and how. Excuse me. What, why, and how. So when you answer those 3 questions, you're giving people your logic, you're walking them through. Now, you probably didn't get to your answer in that order, but you reversed it to make it audience friendly. You're telling them what you think should happen. Now, here's the exciting thing about this. You can take out the why if your audience agrees. If you
Mm.
say what your recommendation is, you're talking to a busy executive and they say, yeah, that makes sense. You don't need to give all of your reasons for why. You can literally skip that, which on some level might be a little disappointing because you've done this homework
I
and
spend so
ready
much
to share.
time thinking about these whys.
Yes, yes. And so that is a natural, honest way to feel about it. But at the end of the day, if your goal was to get X, you've said what X is, and they say, okay, then you want to tell them how we're going to do it, right? Give them some taste of the implementation plan. And that structure communicates your logic in a way that is very easy to follow. There are lots of other ways that you can structure the logic of something, right? You might compare and contrast. You
Mhm.
might give historical information, start with where you were as an organization, and then give, some logical time milestones to talk about it. But the structure of how you communicate what you know is often something people don't really think through. And when you don't think
Mhm.
that through, it comes across in a way that makes sense to you. And you have too much information, right? You have the curse of knowledge. You've been thinking about this idea for some time now, and a lot of the conclusions come naturally. And if you haven't thought about how to spell things out to someone who hasn't thought about this as much as you have, then you're likely going to get the no before they
Yeah.
even really consider it because you've confused them, you've lost them, and rather than them asking you to explain, they're just going to write it off.
No, that's no, I don't think so. And you're done. Yeah. I think it's interesting that organizational structure, sort of that framework, is in the logical appeal category, but it makes so much sense to me because and I was smiling when you introduced what, why, how, because we have students that are about to join us that just learned this. We just talked about this and practiced it earlier this or late last week, I guess. So students, look, what, why, how isn't just something I dreamt up. This is a known principle. But we were talking about the fact that they could have so much supporting evidence, so much data to back up their recommendation, but that if that data and evidence comes out in sort of a mishmash of disorganization, a decision maker is never going to hear it as logical, even if it's a great idea. We can sabotage those great ideas with poorly organized thought process, I guess. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about which one? Pathos. That's the one we haven't talked about. And I find a lot of people struggle with this one, especially in business context. It's kind of like, ooh, emotional appeal. No, we don't do emotions at our company.
It's so funny that we think that. We like to think that, and yet most of our decisions are driven by how something makes us feel. The simple, handy acronym that I use to incorporate pathos into what you're talking about, bring emotion into what you're talking about, is SHARP. So 5 letters, SHARP, spells the word sharp. Think of it as sharpening your pitch. All you do is, and you're already on the S, story. Use a story to get your audience drawn in, hooked, interested in what you're talking about. We love stories. We rewatch, re-listen to stories where we know what's going to happen. Our brains are hardwired to engage on story. It's so funny when you walk into a room where a presentation is happening and someone might be talking about data, talking about statistics, and everyone else is clearly otherwise engaged, right? They're not paying attention until someone starts to tell a story. And then suddenly you see people look away from their devices. They engage, they're interested because stories draw us in. So think about how you can frame your recommendation in the context of telling a story or giving a story about why what we're talking about is important. It doesn't have to be really long, it doesn't have to be drawn out, but a story is a great way to get people hooked or interested. So that's the S in SHARP. The H is humor. Now, the trick about humor is you've got to really know your audience, right? Because it's really uncomfortable if you tell a joke that you think is hysterical and they don't think it's funny. Or you're not telling a joke. You're not telling a joke and they start laughing and you don't know what to do with that either, right? So humor is a tricky one. I will say that up front. But if you really think through how your audience might react to you or just want to kind of break the ice, bring in humor, if you err on the side of caution here and use humor that you're certain won't be offensive. If you don't know your audience, then avoid this.
Right.
If you know your audience pretty well, then you can bring in humor. The last in-person workshop I did was with a group of executives. They were pretty senior in level. And when I came in the room, I noticed that there was no one sitting in the front. Everybody was in the back. And I made a joke about how familiar this felt to the classroom in the right. And they laughed and chuckled, and I promised I wasn't going to bite anyone or make anyone uncomfortable, but just you lighten the mood, you make people feel better when they smile or laugh. And so when you can bring in humor, that does that, if it's appropriate for the audience and the context, it can be quite effective.
Love it.
A in SHARP is analogies. So an analogy is to essentially say that something is like something else, to make a point that explains what you're trying to say. A famous analogy from a movie, the movie Forrest Gump, is life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Now, if you buy an assorted box of chocolates, you have to bite in to figure out what flavor it is. And so the idea here is when you give someone an analogy, you're helping them see something that they might not have made a connection between, right? Box of chocolates and life would not have necessarily thought of those two things together, but with that analogy, you can see how they relate or how a point is made more clear. Instead of just saying the unexpected happens in life, another way to just bring in some emotion, to kind of switch up or add color to what you're saying, is just to bring in an analogy.
Yeah, I saw one of these done recently, so simply, but so effectively. It was talking to tech investors and saying, we're on this, what may just be an AI bubble. Don't get too excited. And then his analogy was simply, it might just be like 2007. And a tech investor would remember what happened in 2007, would remember that bust. And I thought, what an effective, fast, simple, but really clear analogy.
Yes, love it. And the next one in SHARP is pretty similar to analogies. It's references. So the R is make references, right? So you can refer to something that's familiar to the audience. I joked, a student asked me once they asked me, do we really need to read your emails, Professor Lovelace? And I said, Right. Yes, that question was asked. And I said, absolutely. I only send you information I really want you to know in an email. So don't treat my email like an iTunes user agreement. And they all laughed, right? Because we've all done this, right? We get these long pages of legalese that we scroll through. We don't even read it. We don't prepare. We just scroll to the end, click the box, and then say yes. We have no idea what we've signed away.
Right.
And we just carry on with our lives. And I said, don't treat my emails that way. Do not treat them like a user agreement. Read what I'm saying and then move on, right? And I will try to
Love
make
it.
sure it doesn't read like an iTunes user agreement. And
Fair.
so that was but that's a reference that my audience got. They chuckled about it and then we moved on from it, right? But it's a way to
Yeah.
make a connection with the people you're talking about and it brings out emotion.
Yeah. Okay. P. I'm excited to hear about P.
P, last but not least, pictures. Can you give us a
Oh,
visual of what you're discussing, right? Is there a literal picture you can show? If not, you can use vivid words to paint a picture. But whenever you can give someone a picture, right? We see these quotes like a picture is worth 1,000 words or something like along those lines. You save so much time and energy in explaining things when people can just see it. And so if you can give them a visual, give them a picture of what you're talking about, you are engaging pathos.
yes. Okay. So, listeners, we hope you have some great tactics now. If you think ethos is the one you need to lean into a little bit more, credibility appeal, you've got some strategies. Logical appeal, get that organization of what, why, how, maybe not even why. If your audience gives you that thumbs up, the green light right away. And then sharpen your pathos, your emotional appeal using that acronym that Daisy shared. Love it. Thank you. Okay. We promised to show you a game that you can use as a way of learning. I know, Nicolette, I love Sharp as well. It's awesome. I'd never heard it before. Thank you, Daisy. I'm taking notes. I've got Sharp in my notes now. So the game that I'm going to have our students play is it's called Apples to Apples, but we're using, many of you may have played this. I'm going to make a reference here. It's like Cards Against Humanity, except it's family-friendly version of that. Shelby, we've got a slide here, I think, that we might want to pull up just to kind of talk through the instructions. So in the game, there are these green cards and there are red cards. And the goal of the game is to get as many green cards as you can. The way you get a green card is you choose one of the red cards, you say it matches the green card that's in play, and you have to convince the judge to choose your card. We'll play this out so you'll see how this looks in action. Normally when people are playing, when I use this in different training events, I typically have the players be the judges and rotate that. Today, Daisy and I are going to be the judges and do a little bit of debriefing. But if you don't have enough facilitators to go around for every small group that you have playing, it works fine to let them judge it themselves. The players always have 5 cards in their hand, so they can get one new card after each play, after they play a card, and then they make their verbal case to the judge. And I think we have one more slide explaining how the judge, can we advance a little bit here? Yeah. There we go. And then each round, the judge, whether that's in this case, me and Dr. Lovelace, or in the case of the regular play, just kind of the people playing get to pick it. And that's it. Now, in the real game, that's it. You're just playing. And sometimes people don't even make a verbal argument. But since we're trying to teach influence, I ask the players to actually verbalize their argument. Why should the judge pick it? And in the first round, we break out logical appeal, emotional appeal, and credibility appeal, just so people can start thinking more about those concrete tactics that Daisy was just talking about. How do I build logical appeal? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to use that what, why, how. Maybe I should give that a try in this first round when we're really focusing on the idea of logical appeal. In our second round, we're going to play with just credibility appeal as the primary focus. So what can I do to build my trustworthiness in a 30-second verbal argument? Are there citations I could pull out and cite? Is there a way to make this argument seem like I have some experience in this area? And then, of course, emotional appeal is when we're hoping they will use story. The students can use humor. They can use analogy and reference and pictures, at least vivid word pictures, to describe it. So that's the game. That's how we're going to play. We can eliminate that. We can take away the PowerPoint and bring in these amazing students who are so brave to come in front of lots of strangers. I have promised them that you will all be kind and supportive of them because I know the kinds of learners we have. David, Amir, Colin, Aria, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for playing with us today. What's happening right now over in a private chat, Shelby from backstage is sending each person their 5 words, which would normally equate to the red cards. All right, so they each have 5 words now. Everybody got your 5 words? All right. And remember, we're playing logical appeal for the first round. So you're using all the logic you can. Think about what, why, how. Think about speaking to our heads. You want to adapt to your audience. Your audience is me and Daisy. We are your judges right now. And you have to convince us that your word that you choose links to bashful. Bashful, shy, timid, or modest is the green card. Bashful. Pick one of your 5 words that you could convince me and Daisy is a match, connects to, is somehow we should pick your word if bashful is the matching word. Bashful, shy, timid, and modest. Daisy, who do you think should go first?
Well, not knowing any of the students, I will just say, David, you were the first one who showed up on my screen. So if you're ready to go, why don't we have you jump in?
Okay. I'm gonna go for mirrors.
Mirrors, like you
Yeah.
looking glass mirror.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Make your argument, your logical argument.
Yeah. I would say a mirror is shy because it doesn't really show itself. It only shows the thing looking at it, and it's afraid to show itself. So that's why I would say it's bashful.
Interesting. All right. Shall we go with Amir next? In my line of vision, he's next.
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
So I decided to go with family values.
Okay.
So by definition, bashful means reluctant to draw attention to oneself. And I think that families, they tend to value keeping to themselves. In public, a family might want to not draw attention to themselves. They'll stay as a group. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, good. And Colin?
All right, so I chose my word was Ireland, and so I think Ireland is it's very timid because, for one, it's a very small country, and number two, it doesn't really put itself out there like on the global stage. It's kind of like a quiet nation, I guess you could say. So yeah, for those reasons, I'd say it's very timid.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Aria, is this making sense?
Yeah.
Aria is a first-time apples to apples player. So bravo for jumping in with us. You pick one of your words and convince us we should pick it.
I chose at my parents' house because it's like kind of relatable right now. Because when I go back to my parents' house, I don't do the things that I usually do in college. So yeah.
Okay, so logical appeal. Daisy, what do you think?
All right, so I heard logical arguments from all of you, and well done, sort of thinking on your feet. And also, you had 5 choices that you probably would not have chosen for bashful at all. So, good job to everyone for making it work.
Yes.
The one that stuck out to me the most, and partially because it was so intriguing, was the mirror. So, if I were going to vote on one, I would go with David and the mirror.
Yes, I'm voting with Daisy. So that's 2 points for David on this one. Shelby's keeping track of the score here. David's got 2 points, and similar reasoning. It was a unique argument, and yet while it made sense as he argued it. So, and logic is what we were going for. All right. So this round, now what's happening is the students are seeing one more word associated in the private chat. They're getting one more word. So students, you cannot reuse the word you just used. So mirrors, family values, Ireland, and at my parents' house, those are out, can't reuse. But you have one new word that you just saw in chat. And that's so that you still have 5 to choose from, the 4 that we didn't hear the first time, and your one new word. And this time you're trying to convince me and Daisy that your word is a good association for icky. Icky, as in sickening, disgusting, repulsive. Sickening, disgusting, repulsive, icky. And you're using I mean, you can use all 3, but you're leaning in most heavily this time to, which one did I say was next? Emotional appeal? Let's do emotional appeal for icky. All right, so this is your pathos round. Lean in on emotional appeal. This was the one where Daisy taught us sharp stories about ickiness, humor. Can you use an analogy or a reference? How about a picture, a vivid word picture that you might paint to convince us that the word you choose from your deck of red cards, words, is best associated with icky? And I'll give you a second to think about it. We're going to reverse the order this time. So Aria will go first, then Colin, then Amir, then David. We're still your audience. We're still your judges. Are you ready? You got this? And those watching, just know it's so much harder when you're in the hot seat. You might all be like, oh yeah, this would be easy. But first of all, you don't have only 5 weird words to try to connect to icky. And it's so much harder when you're on the spot like this. Okay. Aria, you ready to come off mute and make your case, your emotional, pathos-ridden case for us?
Yeah, I chose the word snow because in Bloomington recently we experienced snow for the first time, and it wasn't my best experience because I'm not used to the snow, and it gave me an ick because I was not able to go to the classes, and it was a huge struggle for me. So yeah.
So snow is icky in Aria's world. Okay, thank you. Colin?
So my word is stubbed toes. Everyone has experience when, you stub your toe on like a corner of a table or something, and you look down and the pain, it hasn't hit in yet, but it's coming, and then it all hits at once. And I think that feeling is very, very unpleasant, to say the least.
Okay, thank you. Amir, are you ready? Convince us
Yeah.
you're icky.
My card that I chose is cottage cheese. So I just like to use some logical description to explain to you what that is. So first off, milk. This is fluid from a wild animal's genitalia. You are then taking that and adding it bacteria, which you will then add acid and pasteurized milk to cause a separation and create this cottage cheese. Now, I don't know, some people do enjoy it, but me personally, the first time I ever tried cottage cheese, I was disgusted. That is all.
Thank you, Amir. David?
I chose doing the dishes. We've all been there at the end of a long day at school or work. We just ate dinner. We're trying to watch TV, and then your mom or your partner comes up to you and says, "You got to do the dishes." And you're just tired. You want to go to sleep, but you have to sit there. You get all wet. It takes a lot of effort, and yeah, that's why I chose doing the dishes.
All right. I have mine. Daisy, are you ready? Are you still thinking? This is a tough one.
I was going to say, this was a really solid round.
Indeed.
I want to talk through what I liked about all of them. And as I talk through them, that'll help me decide.
Okay.
So Aria, the snow, I'm a Southern girl, so I completely understand. And I remember vividly my first Bloomington snow. So I promise it'll get better, and you'll get appropriate gear to help you literally weather those days. But yeah, I can understand that feeling of ickiness. I love going to snow. I'm a skier, but don't like living in it. It definitely wasn't my thing. Colin, the stubbed toe. Last summer, I stubbed my toe and broke it. So once you started walking through that example, I thought, oh, ouch, and yes. So you're in both of these. I'm hearing language that connects to emotion that also resonates. Amir, I'm with you on the cottage cheese. Didn't really know all those details about how it came to be. And that logic was very helpful. And so it was a combination of both the logic and then also some emotion that you did make us feel. And so even if you came into this as a fan, maybe some of the background about how you get to it might have changed your feelings about it, even if it is something that you enjoy. I am lactose intolerant, so I am team no cottage cheese with you there. And then David, dishes are the worst part of adulting. I mean, there's many things, but dishes and laundry are a constant. No matter what, they're always going to be there somehow. They just reappear. So that also is icky. So I agreed with all of you on the icks, and I'm going with the stubbed toe.
Oh, okay. A point for Colin. I'm going to go with Amir's story. I just thought that the vivid description was most apparent for me in that one. I think Colin could have won me over if he described that swelling purplish greenish color that stubbed toes get. Or Aria, had you maybe talked about how once the snow melts, it's this brown, oozy slush mess that gets in the seams of your shoes. David, if you had described what baked on ickiness looks like once it dissipates into the dishwater and how that sponge holds that funky smell sometimes. So yeah, like I think we could have built those, and Amir got me, he got his point because I actually was a cottage cheese fan, and I'm not sure I can be anymore after Amir's pathos argument there. Let's play one more quick round. In this one, you are stressing the credibility appeal. We're going to judge this based on, do we believe you? Do we trust you? Are you a credible source? And you have your new word to replace the one you lost. And let me get us a green word here. Our green word this time around will be visionary, idealistic, prophetic, far-seeing. Visionary is the card to match. We'll give you a second to think about it. Pick your word. Make your credible argument. Learners, we hope that you're seeing online, we hope you're seeing some of the interesting ways that you can use logical appeal, emotional appeal, and upcoming here, some credibility appeal.
And as with all communication skills, these are things that you can practice. And so with a simple card game, you can practice developing out credibility, developing out emotion in your appeals, building in logic. And once you get to the place where this naturally comes as a part of how you communicate, you'll find you're able to influence in situations that doesn't require nearly as much preparation or planning on your part, because it will become second nature.
Absolutely. When I've used this game in live training workshops or online training workshops, I also find that teams just have so much fun doing it that it becomes this great rapport builder. So if some of your teams are just looking for team building exercises, you kind of get a bonus here, because this is a great team builder, but you also get this influence lesson as sort of a backup. Okay. All right, this time let's go Colin, Amir, Aria, David. Colin, you're up
Can we get the definition for visionary one more time?
Absolutely. Visionary, where did I put the card? Here it is. Idealistic, prophetic, far-seeing. Visionary. I can't tell if Amir's smile means he's got the perfect card or he's disgusted by his cards. Colin, you've got the first argument. Let's see how you can illustrate credibility appeals for us. The floor is all yours.
Okay, so my word is Chicago. I am someone who lives 20 minutes outside of the city. I've visited hundreds of times, so I think I can speak on this pretty well. I think Chicago is a very visionary city. The buildings are impressive looking at. The river that runs right through the city is beautiful, as well as the lakefront. And I think just visiting as many times as I have, I think I can speak that Chicago is a very visionary city and also a very good place to visit.
Thank you, Colin. I think I said Amir was up next.
Sure. So I just want to preface, Professor Hughes, I'm your student. I've known you for a whole semester. I've shared so many things with you. I trust you, and therefore, of course, you can trust me. So I want to share with you guys that last year in high school, I spent a huge quantity of my time in AP Physics learning about electricity, and that is why I'm choosing my electricity card as the noun for visionary. So I studied under a physics teacher with a PhD in physics. We often discussed the future of electricity, both in vehicles and home heating, which will certainly be the forefront runners for electricity in the future. Yeah, you can trust me.
Thank you, Amir. He's really taken to heart his lesson. You got to know your audience there. Appeal to the audience. I can't remember who I said was next. Is it Aria or David's up next? How about Aria?
Sure. So I would like to begin by saying that my dad is like obsessed with astrophysics, and so I've been watching like these series like Ancient Aliens, and I've done my bit of research on how the space actually works. And I think my word is man on the moon because I feel like it's like a frontier yet to be explored, and it serves as a metaphor for visionary thinking. It also reminds us of the transformative potential of imagination, innovation, technology, and courage. So, yeah.
Thank you, Aria. Man on the moon, electricity, Chicago. And David, what word are you bringing us today for visionary?
As someone very interested in history and science, there's not many people who you think about as a visionary more than Albert Einstein. Obviously, he's most well known for the theory of relativity and how his visionary thinking revolutionized science. And as well as in science, he also advocated for pacifism and civil rights and other causes that lead him to be a visionary.
Thank you, David. Oh, geez. I think they get harder. They're getting better, Daisy, because I'm having more and more trouble choosing.
They are. And I'm going back to, as I think about this, because each of you now are doing a little bit of a mix of all of these. So if we were going to do a round 4, I would say use all 3 pillars. Some of you are doing a little bit of that already, which is the advanced round, which is awesome. You're Kelly student, so I wouldn't expect any less. And you're Brenda student, so that tells me everything I need to know. That being said, I want to talk through what I heard as it relates to ethos, and then I'll give you my vote.
Okay.
So we started with Colin and Chicago, and Colin did a nice job of making his points about or bringing out the ethos on why he's credible to speak about Chicago, right? That he lives 20 minutes away, that he's been there many times, and that he thinks Chicago is a visionary city. And then Amir built credibility a couple of ways. He's leaning into the trust and the relationship. He reminded you how long he's known you. And so that's about the relationship and connection with you, that he kept saying you could trust him. I would have loved to hear a little more about why, but even pointing out that he could trust, that you can trust him. Maybe he hasn't done anything that's not trustworthy yet. And then he talked about electricity, this past teacher who was an expert, and that those are all credible in terms of sources for why electricity might be visionary. And then Aria talked about her dad, watching lots of documentaries or films on this topic. She used vivid language like transformative or frontier yet to be explored. And on the side of her credibility, this was about personal experience, right? Spending time with this connection that has a lot of expertise, and that being the piece that was really her credibility. And then David, last but not least, you gave lots of really good arguments about why Einstein was credible. So I heard a lot of good logos there. I didn't hear as much about why David is credible in telling us about Einstein. So even something about past research you've done. I mean, you referenced the theory of relativity, which, I mean, I know that Einstein has done a lot of brilliant things. Off the top of my head, in a moment like this, in this game, I don't know that I would have been able to pull that out of my hat so quickly. So clearly there's some background knowledge that you have here, but you didn't tell us that. And so that's one thing to think about for the future is, instead of just telling us what you know, tell us how you know it, because that then adds to your expertise in the overall delivery. This is a tough one for me, because I would say I would grade, in terms of on the content, I would grade two of them about the same, but I'm going to go with Amir.
All right, a point for Amir. I had it narrowed down. For me, it was between Colin and Aria. And when I thought about why, Aria's argument, because of the very vivid word choice that she was bringing to the table, really grabbed my heart. And so it was that, and then I realized, oh, that's emotional appeal. If this were an emotional appeal round, she would definitely have had me, because I mean, we were hearing words like transformative and courage, and I was so into that. Colin made this really sound case that he had personal credibility. And I realized that, as compared to Amir, who made the case that his teacher had credibility, personal content credibility, I was more impressed with personal credibility, I guess, which was something new I discovered about myself. So thank you all for playing and helping me be more self-aware that personal credibility means a lot. So I'm going with Colin. Colin gets my point. Shelby, what's our score? Who's our winner today? They're all winners for being here and for being so courageous, I believe.
I think we're tied, Brenda.
Are we? You were keeping score? Who are our tie between all of them?
Three-way tie.
There's 4 of them. Is there seriously a 3-way tie? Crazy. And we didn't even try that. That was just, okay. Well, that's because they're all brilliant. That's because they're all.
In my book, they're all winners. I heard lots of strengths in all of this, and to hear content and be able to apply it so quickly in such a well thought through way on your toes, that speaks to the great work you're doing with them, Brenda. So thank you for bringing them to join us today.
I'm going to take the credit, but it is really just them. They are brilliant and sharp in the other, all senses of the word. Students, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you. We hope that you got some great ideas for how to improve your own influential abilities. I see that Laura has a question about, are there resources we would suggest? Absolutely. I know Shelby will put up a screen here as we wrap up that has another QR code that will take you to Daisy's LinkedIn site as well as to mine. And there are lots of different courses that we have in the LinkedIn Learning Library that can blow this out for you a little bit. Daisy also has an executive education opportunity coming up. Daisy, you want to speak to that for a minute?
Sure. So people are always reaching out asking, in addition to the LinkedIn Learning virtual content, are there opportunities to have sessions in person? And so in May, the Duke Executive Education Program is hosting a multi-day course on strategic communications, and we will spend some time on the ethos, pathos, and logos that we discussed here. The focus of the whole session is on improving your influence overall. And so it's 3 days that are kind of jam-packed with activities, exercises, and content, very similar to what you structured here, Brenda.
That's great. And I think we have a link to that there it is. It just dropped into the chat, so you can find that strategic communication course link if you want to go directly to that, or of course reach out to Daisy through LinkedIn. Thank you all so much for coming. We're so grateful. Daisy, thank you for being here today. I'm so grateful to you for your thoughts and for encouraging the students in the way that you did. Everybody take care. I'll see you next month when we dive into stories, influential stories using data. How do we tell good data stories? I'll see you next month. Take care, all.
Thank you.